Welcome to NFL Films. I'm Rich Eisen. Tonight, we begin a 6-week journey revealing the NFL 100 all-time team. The best of the best. A century of professional football represented by 100 players and 10 coaches who will soon find a home on the monument wall right behind me. Chris Collinsworth and Bill Belichick will soon join me on the NFL 100 set as we kick things off tonight by showing you the 12 running backs who have made this prestigious list. Buckle up. This is going to be a special ride. The NFL 100 all-time team show is on the air. And welcome inside the NFL 100 studio built in the home of the Sables here at NFL Films. It's a beautiful spot for us to reveal one of the most prestigious groupings of football men in the history of our great sport. We've set up a round table, or I guess an oval table, in the final zero of the 100. Over the next 6 weeks, I'll be joined at this desk not just by some of the best who've played the game, but also by these two gentlemen from NBC Sports, an 8-year veteran in the National Football League, 3-time Pro Bowler, and one of the best calling games. Chris Collinsworth, good to see you, sir.
Rich, great to be here. You know, it's really amazing when you stop and think about this. You play 100 years, there's 100 men going to be on that wall. When you break it down like that, the list itself is almost overwhelming to think about the talent we're about to unveil.
And some of them are going to be stopping by over the next 6 weeks to sit with us, along with none other than one of the best coaches in the history of the sport, an 8-time Super Bowl winner as a head coach and an assistant in this league, Bill Belichick. Good to see you, sir.
Rich, thank you, Chris. It's an honor to be here. This is quite a special event, and appreciate NFL Films doing this.
Yes, and we appreciate you being here again for the 6-week journey revealing this team. 100 players, as voted on by a blue ribbon panel of experts, were chosen with a specific number at each position that we'll reveal over the next 6 weeks. And you, sir, you were part of this blue ribbon panel, correct?
Yes, and it was extremely difficult. There are so many great players. This could easily have been 500. So to get it to 100 was tough. Trying to compare players in the 80s to the 2000s to the 30s was a little bit different, but I think that the panel tried to take all that into consideration. I was very honored to be a part of it.
I guess we should get it started right now. Let's get to it.
Let's do it.
The first player that we introduce in the NFL 100 all-time team, Jim Brown from the Cleveland Browns. He led the NFL in rushing in 8 of his 9 seasons. He retired as the NFL's all-time leading rusher and led the Browns to the 1964 National Football League Championship.
This is Jim Brown, the most devastating ball carrier in the history of football. Considered by most experts as the greatest fullback ever to play the game, Jimmy's harder to bring down than a wild steer.
And yes, he is with us here tonight to kick off our NFL 100 all-time team. What does it mean to you being part of a team that is considered the best over a 100-year span of professional football?
It was, at my age, to be relevant is not too bad.
Rich, if this show had been called the NFL 1 instead of 100, yeah, right, we might have the same guest. I think universally, Bill, once you watch the tape of Jim Brown, there's almost a little bit of an awe and a little bit of an intimidation factor that this guy stood alone. He really did, and he only played 9 years.
I couldn't agree more. You know, Jim, I've admired you for my entire life, and certainly when I was the head coach of the Cleveland Browns, it was such a blessing for me to get to know you, and you had such an impact on my coaching career. It taught me a lot. In observing you as a player, you were obviously the greatest player, could have played in any era. Probably at any position, really. You know, could have played tight end, running back, defense. I mean, you could have played anything, and did. There's nobody other than you that should be the first person in this group.
I grew up in Ohio, and I heard stories about you from the time I was born. And watching the tapes of you play now, I kept writing down one thing. It looks like a dad playing football in the backyard with his kids, and the kids are wrapped around his legs. and you're sort of dragging, and you certainly don't want to hurt the poor little kids. That's what it looked like. It was like a different sort of being was playing football with some young kids out on the field.
And on top of that, then Jim would outrun anybody who was chasing him. So it was the power, the balance, and then just pure speed. He was faster than everybody.
And the wiggle. It didn't matter who he was playing against. He would have been the best in the history of the game.
I'd put him in there right now on 3rd and 1.
I bet you would.
I bet you would. So Jim Brown is the first member announced of the NFL 100 all-time team, 100 players and 10 coaches. And we figured with you sitting right here, we would reveal the first coach on this list, Paul Brown, the man they named the Browns after. The legendary coach made coaching a science. He built a dynasty in Cleveland, compiling a record of 167, 53, and 8, and winning the NFL championship in 1950, 1954, and 1955.
The game's greatest coach and the grandest guy in the world, Paul Brown.
I'll turn to you first, Bill Belichick. Why do you think Paul Brown made this list and is the first for us to announce?
Because he's the greatest coach in the history of professional football. Clear and simple. Everything that we do today, everything that I do today, Paul Brown did. It all started with Paul Brown. And he took football from being a sport to a profession. He made it professional.
He was a genius, every aspect of the game. And so I'm a person, I like great thinkers. And he was as great as anybody I've ever run into that coached the game.
We're about to add another member to our set right here, second running back to be revealed. He's the all-time leading rusher in the history of the National Football League. He is Emmitt Smith, the Cowboy and MVP of Super Bowl 28. A member of the all-decade team of the 1990s, Emmitt Smith ran for an NFL record 18,355 yards in 226 career games.
Emmitt Smith has eclipsed Walter Payton as the NFL's all-time rushing leader.
How are you, Emmitt? Good to see you here.
I'm good, Rich. How are you, man?
Well, I would love to say I'm as happy as you, but you're the one sitting next to Jim Brown, not only physically right here, but your plaques are right next to each other on the NFL 100 all-time team wall. This is pretty cool.
Yeah, it is cool. I mean, to be right here with the legend himself, man who inspires so many other players to come from behind him, and he paved the way for a lot of us. And whether it's passing the torch from him to Walter and then down the line, I mean, it's just so many great players that have come behind Jim, and he set the standard pretty high.
You know, it's really interesting. This used to be a running back league. I mean, when I was growing up...
It still is.
Well, okay, all right. Well, there are a couple of quarterbacks making some money out there.
When things get bad, y'all turn to the running game, just calm things down, so it still is.
But don't you remember growing up, and it was the running backs that really were the star attraction in many ways in the National Football League. You know, our heroes were always running backs, I guess, back in the day.
Still are.
To finish the song, there you go.
Control the clocks.
Exactly. I mean, you have to be able to control the clock some kind of way. And at the end of the day, if you can turn it back there and hand it to someone that can actually get you turn 2 into 4 or 4 into 8, that's a wonderful thing to have.
I can't even believe I'm sitting here looking at you like this. I can remember when I was at the University of Florida, I came back for a visit, and the coaches came by, and they said, "Chris, we need your help." And I said, "What?" He said, "We've got to recruit this kid." I said, "Okay, great." He said, "It's a running back out of Escambia." I'm like, "Okay." I said, "Well," he said, "What is he, like really fast?" And he said, "No." He said, "Is he really big?" He said, "No." I said, "Well, what is he?" He said, "He's really good. That's what he is. He's really good." And son of a gun, that kid that they were talking about that day has now gone on 18,000 yards, the most rushing yards in the history of the National Football League.
He's beyond good. Emmitt, I tell you, I'm just absolutely flabbergasted at the way you consistently can run the ball for positive yards. I've never seen anybody take so many 2-yard gains and turn them into 8-yard plays. I've never seen anything like it.
Bill, coming from you, that is monumental. Because I consider you to be one of the best coaches, if not the best coach in all of football.
I don't know how you can say that because you killed us every time. You ran for 120 yards every time we played you. I'm truly enamored by the way that you can set up blocks and run the football on such a consistent basis. Tell us how you ran the balls. Just tell me what you saw.
For me, it's always about playing chess against a defensive player, trying to get the defensive player to be undisciplined. Force him to make a decision that's really not the right decision. And that is standing and pressing the line of scrimmage or pressing the run play as far as I can to get him out of position, to make him overcommit.
You're the one that I just marvel at the way you make the blocks for the linemen. Even if they're not good blocks, you make them good blocks. And then find the space and get through it. And then, you know, you have such good pad level through the line of scrimmage that you're hard to tackle once you get your pads down.
I'm not 6 feet.
No, I know.
I'm only 5'9.5", and when I'm running, I'm about 5'6". So I shrink.
We've got Emmitt Smith and Jim Brown with us in studio, and there are still 10 more running backs left to reveal on the NFL 100 All-Time Team Show. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back to the NFL 100 All-Time Team Show. Emmitt Smith and Jim Brown are still here in studio, and we've also got them in bronze in our bust corner, thanks to our friends at the Pro Football Hall of Fame.
I think he's one of the most underrated players in the National Football League history.
Oh, my God.
Right? I mean, seriously, because people, you know, they'll look at so many great players on here, and I think that what probably told the tale best of all was that New York Giants game. I mean, you really were hurting in that game, and yet it ended up being one of your best games of all time.
And Smith is hurt. Watch him go right there in the right shoulder. See, right here, he puts his right arm down and then goes on the right shoulder.
To me, that was a defining moment. You know how it is when you're playing a little league football and you scratch and you got blood on you, you start to cry and so forth. My cousins used to say, son, you cannot play the game if you cannot play with pain. And that particular game was one of those real surreal moments to where I kept reciting those things in my mind. Now, I knew what was at stake. If we win this game, we'll have home field advantage throughout the entire playoff. But not only that, there was also this personal thing that was at stake. I needed to continue to lead the league in rushing. So that was important, too.
Let's be real here.
So let's be real.
Here comes Emmitt Smith with that extra padding in place inside his shoulder pad. Not only is he in there, but he's the go-to guy. Emmitt's hurting, you can tell that, but he's still very effective.
Everything was on the line. Everything was on the line. And I knew the best pathway for our team to get to the Super Bowl was to have home field advantage. And when you have Michael Irvin or Troy Aikman or Nate Newton, your offensive lineman, looking you in the eyes, and you know that they know that this guy's in here for us, yeah, it's very meaningful. Very meaningful.
We'll never forget the day Emmitt Smith ran 32 times for 170 yards and caught 10 balls for 62 and did most of it with one arm.
What did you think of the way he ran, Jim?
This guy's a warrior, man. That attitude, that mental attitude that you must have to be really great. But he was the epitome of that. Because he always had to probably hear being not as large as someone else, or maybe not as fast as someone else, but that determination, unbelievable. He's always got to move, some kind of a move, to continue the play. And it's so valuable because, you know, you look at his size, and he's kidding about not being 6'4". He didn't need all of that. He used that size and every doggone thing else to be able to gain yards.
Let's add some more names to this list of running backs. Eric Dickerson is the latest member of the NFL 100 all-time team. 1984, he ran for a record 2,105 yards. That is the NFL single-season rushing record. He surpassed 1,000 yards in each of his first 7 seasons. Dickerson was a 6-time Pro Bowler and 5-time All-Pro.
That's a nice piece of running, showing you, look at this and take that. He had a cornerback trying to get to him, but he just put it down into another gear. That's fun to watch.
What'd you think about Eric Dickerson? What'd you like about his game, Emmett?
Loved him. I could never run as pretty as Eric, never fall as graceful as Eric, but love watching him run. I mean, you talk about somebody that had a running style that was phenomenal and light. And his feet just like pitter-pat, pitter-pat, pitter-pat. And just acceleration and speed and grace. I mean, just awesome. Just pure awesome. I loved watching him. Had him up in my high school locker. Had him, had Marcus. I had Jim, I had Walter. Had all of them in my high school locker because I wanted to be all of them in one.
Not a bad way to start the running back club here on the NFL 100 all-time team. Jim Brown, Emmitt Smith, Eric Dickerson on the monument wall, and we'll be soon joined in person by another all-time running back great. We're back with more on NFL Network in a moment. All right, welcome back to the NFL 100 all-time team show. We have, to kick things off here, if you're just joining us, Jim Brown and Emmitt Smith together as we're revealing the 12 running backs to start off our NFL 100 list. Let's get to one more guy to join us here in studio if we can. His name is Barry Sanders. I think we've heard of him. He's pretty damn good when he runs the football. Amassed 15,269 rushing yards and 109 total touchdowns in his stellar 10-year career. The 6-time All-Pro was the NFL Offensive Player of the Year in 1994 and 1997, and he joins us right here at NFL Films.
Sometimes you just got to look to the heavens and say, wow. When God created Barry Sanders, even he didn't know what he made.
Barry Sanders, welcome to the all-time team.
Great to be here.
Good to see you
Thanks
here.
for having me.
This is pretty cool. Do you have any idea how many rushing yards there are at this table? 26.1 miles combined of rushing yards.
So we run a marathon, right?
Yeah, pretty much. You run in a marathon. Well, I guess we need to talk a little bit about the elephant in the room right now, the season in which you went for 2,000 yards in a single season. Do you know whose defense you topped 2,000 yards against in Week 17 of that year?
I do. I have a good idea.
It wasn't mine.
That guy over there.
Here's what I tell him. When Barry Sanders gets the ball, everybody's at the point of attack. The right corner, the right end, the free safety, the nose tackle, the left corner, the left one. Everybody's at the point of attack because he could hit every spot on the field. And I don't care where he started, that didn't mean anything either. No. And then when he got there, you better be ready to tackle him.
They were stout. No, they were stout. It was a good game.
Barry Sanders goes for another rushing title, needs 131 to hit the 2,000 mark.
We knew going in, playing against Coach Parcells and Coach Belichick, they didn't give us much. I mean, we had to earn everything. But it was a fun game to look back on.
Barry cut back. Now he's got it. 50, 40. He's well over 2,000 now. 30. Look out. Right side 20. 15 to the 10. To the 5. Holy mackerel.
53 yards, the longest against the Jets defense all season. 2,000, the third man in NFL history.
The one thing all of us have in common is watching the game film, right? In a private room filled with NFL players. Out of my entire experience, I think the one guy who led the league in that sound, right? It just comes out of you. I don't know what it is when you're in an NFL room and somebody does something that is just off the charts. You start hearing guys going, ooh. And it just comes, and Barry Sanders led the league in that sound.
pretty sweet. Yeah, that's pretty sweet. That was the point. But that was the point, though. You know, that's the kind of runner that I was, and growing up, watching so many other great players. I mean, all of my favorite running backs.
This guy right
and I
here,
would,
too.
you know, my dad would always just be talking about something, and he, you know, he'd go off into how Jim Brown was the greatest. You know, didn't matter what he was talking about. You know?
First, I want to say hello to the greatest running back that ever lived, the number one running back who ever lived. He's not with us today. I think he's with his family in Los Angeles, Mr. Jim Brown. So I want to say hello to him, Jim. And now I want to introduce you to the third best running back that ever lived, Barry Sanders.
You know, you two guys set the record for retiring too soon.
That's true.
You know, out of everybody you want to talk about in this league, retiring too soon, I think these two guys are the leaders.
Yes. Well, I think he retired too soon. I think I was right on time. You hang around.
I tell people all the time, I mean, if this guy here would not have retired, he probably would have been the first 20,000-yard running back in the National Football League. Period.
20,000, wow.
I still believe that to this day.
Do you think about that, Barry?
I don't know.
Do you ever stop and think about that?
You know, I was in my 10th season.
Yep.
I know I certainly had at least another season left. I mean, in this game, who knows, right? But yeah, I mean, at the same time, I can't complain about my career. And, you know, maybe had you shipped me off to, you know, New England or something like that, maybe I could have played another 10 years or whatever. But being the company of these men, I mean, I just can't complain about that.
Let's add some more names to our NFL 100 all-time team monument wall here at NFL Films. The next member of the running back class is O.J. Simpson. The 1973 NFL MVP became the first member of the 2,000-yard single-season rushing club. He was also a 5-time All-Pro selection.
I know for a lot of people who will be watching this show, they'll know the story. But he was America's hero. I mean, he was on all the commercials. He was the guy that was front and center for the National Football League. So this was a pretty stunning fall from grace, right? But I'm going to talk just about football for a minute, because 2,000 yards in a 14-game season is off the charts. And in my mind, there really was only one player that you could really compare him to, someone that size, with that amount of wiggle, with those moves and that speed, and it's Jim Brown.
Tremendous speed, tremendous acceleration. Not a hard hitter as such, but the track thing and the football thing was kind of like his MO. Not moves because he was an ugly runner. We used to,
Don't say that.
Come on now. What about Dickerson and Gail Sayers?
Grace. They're definitely
runners,
graceful.
pretty
Yeah,
runners.
definitely graceful.
It was a herky-jerky runner with tremendous speed, but a great back, just a tremendous back.
It's interesting you mentioned Gale Sayers, Jim Brown, because Gale Sayers is the latest member to be revealed in the NFL 100 all-time team.
Give me 18 inches of daylight. That's all I need.
The 1965 Rookie of the Year, who scored a then-rookie record 22 touchdowns. The 5-time All-Pro was previously named to the NFL's 50th and 75th anniversary teams.
As the saying goes, you ain't seen nothing yet. Watch him now. Sayers, NFL Rookie of the Year. A one-man Gale. Dashing 85 dazzling yards on the longest punt return of the season. Here he is, galloping Gale, carrying the mail. This is his 6th touchdown of the game.
You know, the 6-touchdown game against San Francisco is always going to be first and foremost. But I think out of all the running backs, as far as on the pretty list, it may well be Gale Sayers that struck you first. And the other thing that I didn't really think about until I started going back and watching all these films is what garbage the fields were that you guys played on. I mean, everything in Chicago and Cleveland was just a big mud bowl out there, and you never saw them slip. You never saw them fall. You never saw them, and there was just this grace and this beauty and this ability to cut on these garbage fields that was remarkable. And talking about a career that just ended too soon, maybe at the top of the list.
To me, he seems like one of those guys that we often say is like before his time. The kind of athlete he was, you know, the kind of cuts he made. He fits in that category of running back who almost looks like he's doing something else, because it's almost like ballet, because it's so graceful and it just catches your eye a certain way. Like, God, this guy's playing football, but look how graceful and fluid his movements are. It's just so easy to remember so much of what he did in just a short time that he played.
Well, we're going to give you guys a break. You're going to come back later on in the show. But when we come back, more running backs on the NFL 100 all-time team list revealed. And the Bellastrator makes its NFL 100 all-time team show debut as Coach gets on the telestrator to introduce 3 more members of the class. All right, welcome back to the NFL 100 all-time team show, and we're about to get the first instance of what we're going to see throughout this 6-episode series. Some members of the team revealed via Bellastrator, starting with Dutch Clark. Dutch Clark was a charter member of the Pro Football Hall of Fame, a 6-time unanimous All-Pro, and member of the 1935 Lions championship team.
Dutch is one of the great two-way players and really one of the most versatile players that ever played the game. This is Dutch in the single wing formation as a tailback, power football. He was a very elusive runner and also could run with power. You could see a hard guy to tackle. A good passer in his day, not to the level of the expertise that we are accustomed to now, and the ball was a lot different, but he was effective to throwing the ball. As well as everything else that he did. And it was a two-way era. It's just a lot different than what we're used to seeing today. Being a productive player, again, on defense. Here he comes.
Did the referees sell ice cream during the game or not?
I like the plus fours. Yeah. That was very good. Moving on a decade for another two-way player, Coach. Steve Van Buren, the 4-time NFL rushing champion, known by a couple nicknames, Wham Bam and Supersonic Steve. Van Buren scored 77 touchdowns in only 83 career games. When he retired in 1951, he held the NFL's single-season and career rushing records.
Well, Steve Van Buren was another versatile player, cut by his high school football team. Came back and eventually played as a senior, went on to LSU, and this guy was hard to tackle. He ran with a lot of power. These outside plays like this, he'd start him outside, but once there was some daylight and he could turn up, this is where he was effective. He was effective going north and south. Made a lot of tough yards, carried the ball, 30, 35 times a game. Good look here at the Eagles, true T formation. This is really Van Buren right here. Good straight ahead, inside runner. Ran with good pad level. You can see him getting his pads down through the line of scrimmage. He was a mudder. Seems like every one of these games we watch is in the mud.
More mud.
As soon as there's room to turn up, he's turning up. Good speed, not breakaway speed, but just hard to tackle. I don't think you want to play against Steve Van Buren.
One more guy to introduce through the Bellastrator, and I think fans of this show, when you watch throughout the 6 weeks, you are going to see a specific affinity Coach Belichick has for some Baltimore Colts. And we start on that front with 2-time NFL champion Lenny Moore. 1964 is when Lenny Moore became the first player in NFL history to score 20 touchdowns in a single season.
Rich, the versatility of this player is just remarkable. He's the only player in the National Football League in the 40-40 club. 48 touchdowns receiving and 63 touchdowns rushing. Started his career as a running back, later on moved to wide receiver. He could have played in any era at either spot. This is Lenny playing wide receiver here, coming on the reverse. That's Unitas handing him the ball. And then just watch him go.
The gliding, you know, Marcus Allen type, just easy.
Nobody catches this guy. I wouldn't call him a power runner, but he runs with good power. This is pretty impressive here. He had deceptive power for a 200-pound guy, pound for pound. He was a strong, tough runner, and he knew where the goal line was. He did a real good job of getting the ball into the end zone.
I hate to think what Lombardi was saying on that one. Grabbing.
He has big plays in every game. And again, they're inside, they're outside, they're in the passing game, they're off tackle. You know, here he is on the draw play. Okay, it's all over now.
Let me see you.
I mean, it's just forget about it.
I mean, that's just right up the middle.
You're not catching this
Just
guy.
take it and run it right up the middle.
I think he's a little bit underrated. I mean, I don't know how you can be on the top 100 team and be underrated. He might be a little bit underrated.
Oh, here endeth the first film lesson from Bill Belichick on the NFL 100 all-time team show that returns in a moment with Jim Brown, Emmitt Smith, and Barry Sanders. All right, welcome back to the NFL 100 all-time team show, and welcome back to our panel of Jim Brown along with Barry Sanders and Emmitt Smith. As a matter of fact, our panel has combined 45,936 career rushing yards. I do have to mention, Chris, if we include you, it goes down to 45,921 career rushing yards.
Thanks so much, Rich.
Facts are facts. They're stubborn things. But it's good to have all of us here again with Bill Belichick on our NFL 100 all-time team show. That adds another member that could be just known in one word, sweetness. Walter Payton is a member of this team. There's no shock at all. When he retired, he had the rushing record that you eventually broke, Emmitt. 16,726 rushing yards in his years as a Chicago Bear, a 9-time Pro Bowler, a member of the Super Bowl 20 champion Bears, and is in the hearts and minds of Chicago sports fans every single day.
Quick pitch to Walter, looking for the record, cuts back, he's got it, he's out over the 25 to the 26-yard line. Walter Payton becomes the National Football League all-time leading rusher, surpassing Jim Brown, and that's the equivalent to Hank Aaron breaking Babe Ruth's all-time home run record.
Jim Brown, I want to give you the floor first on Walter Payton. The first time that you noticed him was when?
The first time I saw him on television, I almost jumped out of my seat because I saw the greatness in that one particular play. And I've always felt that having heart and determination was a necessary ingredient. And I always said no one had a bigger heart than Walter. That sucker would get after you. And he wasn't dead large. Determination and his strength and agility and speed and acceleration was all there. And Walter had it all.
Work ethic was paramount for him. He was definitely driven. He wanted to outwork anybody and everybody.
I remember as a kid seeing him run some hill. And for me, that was just inspiration to see a guy working like that, to use any means necessary to get past a defensive player.
Watching that and watching his highlight tapes and his training regimen, those are things that stand out to me the most. I mean, his heart was as big as the Grand Canyon. I'm serious.
Obviously, his running was incredible. His vertical jump had to be about 60. When you saw him on the goal line go over the top, it was just insane.
I would say the biggest treat for me was playing in Detroit, playing against the Bears twice a year. He had retired, obviously, but he would come out and watch the games, and knowing that Walter Payton was in the stands, watching you play the Bears. And so I always say, you know, for a lot of my great games against the Bears, you can blame Walter Payton because it was such great motivation for me.
Yeah, it is amazing today. I mean, in 2019, you mention his name in Chicago and people just light up.
Sweetness.
Sweetness, exactly. just known by one name. Well, this has been a blast hanging with you guys on this show. Congratulations on making the team. That's Jim Brown, that's Emmitt Smith, that's Barry Sanders on the show. When we come back, the last two members of the dozen running backs on the NFL 100 all-time team show. Don't go anywhere. And that's who we have on our team so far, with only 2 running back slots left to mention right here, and we'll get to them in a second. You could easily put 10, 12 other running backs on this team. This is maybe the most competitive department on the all-time team that we're going to hit.
I mean, and the difference in styles is what makes it so great, right? I mean, what is a great running back? It is just defined by so many different things, and we've seen a lot of it here today.
We're going to see some more.
Let's get to it. A member of the 1940s all-decade team, Marion Motley, is now on the NFL 100 all-time team.
The Mammoth Motley, 238 pounds of football dynamite. Motley football's version of the atomic bomb.
A year before Jackie Robinson signed with the Dodgers, Marion Motley signed with the Cleveland Browns along with fellow Hall of Famer Bill Willis. Motley averaged 5.7 yards per carry, and he was a unanimous All-Pro selection in 1948 and in 1950.
I'd always heard so much about him as the person and breaking the color barrier and all those things. And then I got to watch the tape. And the tape is so stunning that it is almost hard to describe. I mean, it looks like somebody messed up and put a guard or a tackle in the backfield. I mean, that's really what he looked like. And even the number was 76. So you go, what is this, a trick play? Something Bill would pull out. And then they hand him the football. And you're talking about guys making business decisions. There were people finding a reason to not go tackle this big guy. He is truly one of the superstars of the history of the game.
There are a lot of guys that gave their teammates a chance to tackle him first.
Yeah.
But Motley was a very unselfish player. Started as a two-way player, defensively played linebacker, and then offensively was a blocker as much as he was a runner. So as impressive as his ball carrying was, he was a very unselfish player that was a lead blocker and a very good one.
Touchdown number 1, off tackle, with Motley throwing the key block.
So there's one last spot, and that spot belongs to Earl Campbell, the Tyler Rose. Earl Campbell was the 1979 National Football League Most Valuable Player. He was the Offensive Player of the Year for 3 consecutive seasons from 1978 through 80, and in 8 seasons, Campbell gained 10,213 yards from scrimmage. The business decision coming downhill out of the backfield.
We know what he was as a player, right? I mean, his thighs were that big around. When you met the guy, you felt strange because all you could do is look at his legs, and it was like, it is real, look at that guy. I think one of the nicest human beings I've ever met, but boy, what an intimidating presence.
Oh my God. You had to get him before he got going, because once he got going, boy, it was like a truck. What a tough football, and fast. If there was space, he could hit it and take it the distance, and it's so hard to tackle. This guy was one of the toughest football players in my mind that ever played.
So there are the 12 running backs named. Their plaques are on our monument wall. And if you are sitting there saying, where's my guy? How come you didn't put this person in or not? Just know that there's a live reaction show on NFL Network as soon as we are done. But we are not yet done. There are 10 coaches on the all-time team. Paul Brown was revealed as the first earlier on in the show, and we have one more to reveal. And his name is Bill Belichick, the 8-time Super Bowl champion as a head coach and assistant coach in this league. As a head coach, most all-time playoff wins, 31. Most all-time Super Bowl wins, 6. Third on the all-time list in terms of career wins, including playoffs, behind only Papa Bear Hallis and Don Shula.
Look, fellas, it's just about doing our job. Come on, fellas, just do your job. Just do your job. Just do our job and get on to the next play.
I know, Coach Belichick, you like talking about your personal accomplishments and your legacy, like the proverbial, use that phrase again, head hole. But if I was not asking you this question, I wouldn't be doing my job. What do you think of being mentioned with Paul Brown and the others that are to come on the NFL 100 all-time team coaching list?
You know, it's an incredible honor. It's incredibly flattering. Those coaches were all my idols. They were all the ones that I looked up to. And we all know this is the ultimate team sport. And I've had the great fortune to coach so many great players and have so many great coaches and scouts. It's really an honor to all the people that I've worked with and been able to coach.
This is a guy who has lived the ultimate football life. I mean, you know, from back in the days, and he knew Johnny Unitas when he was a little boy, and his father, Steve, who had a huge impact, I'm sure, on your life, to the days of coaching for $25. And you learn the game. Let's start at the bottom. Let's work our way to the top. That's why he is who he is.
One of the biggest challenges really has been just the evolution of the game. The game's changed, and that's forced everyone to change. And I think learning to adapt and learning to adjust. And I really believe that there's a way to win. You just have to figure it out.
Every year, it's ripped apart, and you start all over. And you bring in a bunch of new guys, and in September, they're always, no offense, a very average football team, because they're trying to do everything, right? He has already played 20 different defenses in the month of September, and other teams have played 2. But by the time we get to December and January,
look out.
Then they don't know what they're going to get. The Rams had no idea what they were going to throw at them in the Super Bowl. And Sean McVay will tell you that. They had no idea what they were going to get. So how do you practice for it?
Good pressure. That's it. Good pressure.
And that's part of the genius.
Well, and I think fundamentally it really comes back to, you can go all the way back to a few hundred years BC. Sun Tzu, The Art of War. Attack weaknesses, utilize strengths, and figure out what the strengths are on your team. There's some things you have to protect, find the weaknesses of your opponent, and attack. You can't win a war by digging a hole. You got to attack. So you have to figure out where you want to attack, how you want to attack, and that changes week to week, game to game.
Well, in terms of adapting, we could add another segment and continue talking about you, or just end the show as we were expecting to and move on. What would you prefer to do?
Oh, we got a lot to do. Let's move on.
Let's move on. Okay. This has been a fun first show, and you can see again what we're going to do.